We're on a mission from God.
Wendy?
So I got that going for me.
Darling?
Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Light of my life.
We enjoy your films.
I am a human being.
I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
Welcome to Vintage Video, where we're rewatching the 80s so you don't have to. We'll be reviewing every major film release of the 1980s in real time. I'm Patrick O'Reilly.
I'm Jesse Bayless.
And I'm Richard Wells.
And today marks the 40th anniversary of the release of Brubaker on June 20th, 1980. It was written by W.D. Richter, based on a story by Richter and Arthur A. Ross, and an uncredited story credit for Bob Rafelson, suggested by the book Accomplices to the Crime, written by Thomas O. Murton and Joe Hyams, directed by Stuart Rosenberg, and also a little bit Bob Rafelson, and released by 20th Century Fox.
I don't understand this suggested by. Did you get any more information about what the hell suggested by means?
Yes, we'll go into that now.
Okay.
The film is based on the real-life experiences of Warden Thomas Murton, co-author with Joe Hyams of the 1969 book Accomplices to the Crime, The Arkansas Prison Scandal. In 1967, he was hired by Governor Winthrop Rockefeller. That's a classy name.
Of the Rockefellers?
Winthrop Rockefeller, to reform Arkansas's Tucker State and Cummins State prison farms. But Murton was dismissed less than a year into the job because his work was creating too much bad publicity for the state's penal system, in particular the discovery of numerous graves belonging to prisoners who'd been killed in these prisons. Much of the squalid conditions, violence, and corruption depicted in the film was the subject of a 1970 federal court case, Holt v. Sarver, in which the federal court ruled that the Arkansas prison system violated inmates' constitutional rights and ordered reform. The first script, written by Arthur Ross, was the true story, but Ross passed on the opportunity to direct. Duties to direct the fictionalized adaptation, which is the reason we get story suggested by. It's not the actual story in the book. It's kind of like When Time Ran Out.
Yeah, but I thought that generally you would do a based on. Like, based on is the terminology that we tend to see when it's not an exact
apparently
representation of
it was loose enough that it wasn't based on anymore. But
Okay.
I think in When Time Ran Out they still used based on, even though it's even less based on the story than this is.
I mean, they changed the characters' names and they changed enough, I guess, of the events. Because, like, he never went in to the prison.
Right.
So
as an inmate. That was not part of the real story. But duties to direct the fictionalized adaptation by W.D. Richter of Ross's draft were dismissed by George Roy Hill, Robert Wise, Mark Robson, and Robert Mulligan.
some good people in there.
Yeah. Richter achieved success in the mid to late 70s with Slither and his Body Snatchers remake, the 78 version, my favorite. And Paramount commissioned him to do a rewrite on the script that he had turned in before. They passed on the finished script, at which point Alan J. Pakula expressed an interest in directing. But he wanted too much time to start, so producer Ron Silverman got the script to director Bob Rafelson to direct. Paul Newman and Jack Nicholson both turned down the role before Redford. Redford was attached for a paycheck of $3 million. Director Bob Rafelson was fired after 9 days of shooting for already being 5 days behind schedule.
Wait,
Yeah.
What?
In 9 days, he managed to already be 5 days, so he was only 4 days into the scheduled shoot. And also for allegedly assaulting 20th Century Fox executive Richard Berger, an accusation that he eventually admitted to, but to hear him tell it, it was as much assault as what Brubaker does to the Doctor in this film.
Okay. But he did it for 5 days.
Yes. He just beat a Fox executive for 5 days on set, and that cost them 9 days worth of time. Richter and Ross received Academy Award nominations for their writing. After the film, Rafelson fired a breach of contract and slander suit against Fox for $10 million. He also asked for $500,000 in directing fees for the 9 days that he spent on set, and $100,000 in deferrals and profit percentage, and he won the case. So I don't know.
Really?
I don't know how much he was actually awarded, but he won the suit that he filed.
That's surprising.
So we start the film in pre-dawn as a bus is leaving town for Wakefield Prison, fully loaded with new inmates. They stop at early light when a pair of trustees is carrying a wounded man onto the bus. The trustees are also prisoners, but for some reason they're allowed to have rifles to staff the prison. One prisoner in particular, played by Robert Redford, is particularly disturbed by what he sees. We call this character Collins, I think, for now. The prisoners are marched through mud into Wakefield and then into a barbershop where everyone's getting their required haircuts, but it doesn't really seem like they took a lot off.
No, they were paying off the barber
to not cut their hair.
Cut their hair.
Yeah.
But it just seems like at least one of these guys would have been like, I don't care.
So some of them did get haircuts.
Well, none of the main characters have haircuts for the rest of this movie.
Yeah, because they paid him off.
Yeah, it's just weird to me that literally every actor was like, no, don't cut my hair, and everyone that wasn't an actor was like, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
It's a weird coincidence. Then they are moved into the bunks where there's not enough beds for everybody, and one of the trustees says that nobody gets a bed until someone gets out or dies because there's just straight not enough beds for everyone. We have like a long montage of listless prisoners here in the barracks just playing games and talking to each other. And eventually one of them is grabbed and they say that they want you down at the bars. And he's like, but I didn't do anything. I don't understand why this is happening. And they drag him away. And he gets tied up to this. It's just a row of bars. And he's beaten with this short whip by some of the trustees. And they leave him hanging there on the bars. The next day, a pair of prisoners are forced to stand barefoot on tops of glass bottles for an extended period of time.
I guess that's the punishment. I thought the camera was going to pan up and they were going to have like a noose or something around their necks.
That was my expectation too.
I think it's just super painful, but they seem pretty good at it at this point. So it doesn't seem like it's their first time on there. The prisoners are put to work in the field slinging hose. The second in command bothers the warden about doing some paperwork that needs his attention, but he doesn't seem to care. The next day, someone finally unties the hanging prisoner, and a man sweeping the floors with one messed up eye shakes his head, just disappointed by the whole scene. On a quick break from the field work, a fight breaks out between some prisoners. An uninvolved prisoner wearing sunglasses pops a switchblade or like a...
it's like an X-Acto knife or some kind of...
like a shiv.
Some kind of sharp piece of metal.
He tries to break up the fight before the guards fire a few shots in the air. A switchblade guy is forced to hold his friend down while he's getting whipped by the guards because they determine he caused the fight. Yeah,
he caused the fight by he was being hassled because the night previously he had been raped.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, yeah, I bet you're liking that. So he threw his plate of food at him, and that started the fight, but he got punished for it in the end.
Yeah, and his friend had to hold him down for it. Back in the prison hospital in quotes, prisoners are selling their blood for money as the doctor is stepping out of the room. He's not offering much care to the patients. There's one who's beaten almost into a coma.
Not going to make a joke about blood money?
No, I'm not. Unacceptable. In the cafeteria, Switchblade asks for a sandwich, and they tell him that they're all out. But after he insists, the guy behind the counter tries to sell food off of a trustee's plate from in the kitchen. He's like, are you done with that? And he's like, yeah, 2 bits. And so he brings this... It's like a piece of steak with one bite taken out of the middle of it.
Well, I think it's just the gristle left on the steak.
Yeah, it's like it's been eaten around, basically.
Yeah. He brings it back to the counter, and then Redford tries to outbid him and says 75 cents. And then he says $1, and Switchblade gets the meat. As they're walking back to their tables, Switchblade tells Redford,
"You just cost me 50 cents that was needed elsewhere."
You messed up my day by trying to outbid me on this. The regular food that they're forced to eat in this prison just has maggots on it, and everyone's urging Redford to just eat it because of the protein. We cut back outside as a tractor is loading wood onto a truck. A local carpenter is angry that it's not as much wood as he needs from the prison farm. Huey is basically trying to negotiate with this guy. It's Emmet Walsh is playing the character.
Yeah, he's great.
It seems like he's getting shortchanged here, and he's upset about it, and Huey's like promising to make it up to him. Later, he takes a couple prisoners, including Redford, to a local diner where they are forced to carry frozen meat into the kitchen. And again, it seems like he's shortchanging this guy. He says,
"What the hell is it? You told me 2 steers. I need 2 steers.
I know, Pink. I'm sorry. I just couldn't do it this way.
He says, I'll make it up to you somehow. Just, you got to deal with this for now. I'm sorry. I thought I had more. And he's like, well, suppose I stop giving you free beer. He's like, look, we'll make up for this. It'll happen eventually. The prisoners return back to the truck unsupervised, but this guard, Huey, is allowed to just walk into the back of the restaurant and into the attached home where the guy who owns the diner lives with his sister.
Mm-hmm. Of which this guy, Huey Rauch, has a relationship with.
Right.
So I don't... These trustees seem to have an awful lot of freedom, and they don't seem to really care about these other prisoners trying to
Are they outside the prison here?
Yeah, they're No.
Like they're out in public, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
There's a restaurant with a bar.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it has to be. The restaurant can't be on the prison grounds.
It's just weird that he's allowed to walk around anywhere and he has a gun and everything, and that he's allowed to just walk into local businesses, and they trust him in a car with other prisoners.
Is the implication here that they're selling the meat that was supposed to go to the prisoners?
Correct. So the prison has a farm, but the goods on the farm are not being distributed to the prisoners. Like the cows are being sold to people outside.
And the same thing with food that is being shipped by the state to the farm to feed the prisoners specifically. But yeah, he sneaks into this home attached to the diner and sneaks up behind this girl she's like brushing her teeth at a kitchen sink, and it surprises her. And then we realize very quickly that they're actually in a relationship. Another trustee named Floyd dresses down the prisoners for taking too long loading the wood. After multiple lectures, one prisoner purposely breaks the chain on the truck to dump the whole load of logs on the ground and waste everyone's time.
Yeah, this is Bullen.
Yeah.
He got a big old like wooden spike through his hand.
Ugh,
yeah.
And
God.
he was just taking the time to pull it out when they hassled him for like sitting down on the job. And that's when he got
to
fed
break
up.
the chain.
Yeah, he breaks the chain and lets all the logs roll off.
Never break the chain, never break the chain.
Yeah, the size of that thing that's stuck in his hand is so disturbing.
Yeah, it was pretty gross. The next night, Switchblade is informed that he has a phone call and screams while he's being dragged away. Redford, as the Collins character, asks what phone call is code for. But nobody answers. They just kind of shake their heads and scoff at him for not knowing. Because clearly it's just being beaten.
Well, though he seems like Jack Nicholson at the end of Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, maybe it's electroshock or something.
Because he's just totally out of it. He's just walking under the power of other people putting him in a direction.
Yeah. The next day, yeah, he looks pretty messed up. A few men are selected in the yard to attend to the death row prisoners and empty their buckets. They have little buckets in their cells. Redford and Larry Lee Bullen, he's currently a zombie from having been beaten or electrocuted all night, are chosen to do this. When Larry Lee gets into the death row area, suddenly one of the prisoners is holding him hostage in exchange for a conversation with the man, which he means the warden when he says the man. But the trustees don't care about Switchblade, so the ransom doesn't work. The inmate here, the death row inmate, played by Morgan Freeman, starts singing R-E-S-P-E-C-T, which, if you'll recall, is a song sung by Aretha Franklin from our previous episode, released the same day, Blues Brothers.
Some fucking respect around here. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. I know what it means to me. But you want little respect. But you need little respect. All I'm asking for a little respect when you come home. Baby, when you come home. Thank you.
Hey.
This is apparently where, quote-unquote, Collins draws the line and asks to be let into the cell, claiming to be the man. But here, I don't think the other two trustees, Yaphet, Kotto, and the other guy, I don't think they know that he's serious yet.
No, and Morgan Freeman's character isn't totally altogether there either.
Yeah.
So he's able to convince him. And I thought this was going to go a totally different way. I thought that he was going to, because I read up about the movie, so I know who he is for real.
Yeah.
But I thought what was going to happen was, I thought he was going to stay in undercover longer. And I thought that this was just going to be like a joke, like to the guards. Like he's telling Morgan Freeman,
I'm the man.
I am the man.
I'm the new warden here. My name's Henry Brubaker.
Oh, that he was going to come out and be like, I can't believe he bought that or something like that?
yeah. But then it's like, no, this whole scene takes a turn.
Yeah.
I actually completely forgot when you told me what this movie was about, or wasn't listening. But either way, I thought he was joking here, like he was just trying to get his way. So I think if you went into this movie not knowing anything about what this movie was, you might think what I was thinking, which was, oh, he's just trying to gain this guy's trust, and then he's going to get in there and save this guy, and that's not actually what's happening.
And based on the reaction from Yaphet, Kotto and from the Joe Spinell character, they both seem to think the same thing, that he's just fucking with him because He's of a diminished capacity for reason, and he's just going to buy whatever you say so we can get this guy out of the cell. But he says, I am the warden. I'm the new warden here. And he says, how come you look like a scumbag? And he says, because I'm trying to fool those boys out there. And he looks into his eyes, Morgan Freeman does, and he can see that he's being serious. And he also knows that these other two guys don't believe him and they think he's screwing with them. So he starts laughing maniacally and demands a whole laundry list of things that he's had in his head. He wants a paint job for the whole death row area. He asked for yellow specifically. He wants a window in his cell. He wants liquor and a TV and maybe a skylight. He's just coming up with more and more things that he wants as he goes. And Brubaker says, well, why don't you come in here, show me where the picture window should be. And as soon as Freeman gets into the smaller cell, Brubaker turns tail and locks him in it. And as he steps out, he points to Larry Lee, the switchblade guy, who's still collapsed on the ground from having been choked out. And he says, you need to get this man some medical attention. You paint the cell whatever color Freeman wants, basically. So on their way back to the main office, Yaphet Kotto is telling him, you need to stop screwing around. Like, all I got to do is raise my right hand and that tower guard will blow you away. And he says, I think you're going to make a great escort. Why don't we keep moving? So together they walk to the warden's office, and Brubaker just goes right into the office and lets him know that he's been relieved of duty. But the warden thinks this is just a prisoner, so he pulls a gun out of his desk to point it at him.
But then he unconvincingly lifts off information about a guy. He's like, what? You got most of it wrong.
Yeah. You feel like this is information that you'd want to have memorized before you went in undercover.
Well, and also as a way to convince them that you're the new warden, knowing things about the other prisoners is not super convincing.
Yeah, what should have happened was call so-and-so right now, and they'll explain to you who I am.
Well, but he would never make that call.
Or he would say so-and-so is going to call in 15 minutes.
That's what I would have done.
Yeah, but instead he says, to prove to them that he's the actual new warden, he's just giving information like, oh, this guy's name is something, and he screws up the guy's name, and he says he's been here for 3 years in June, and he's like, well, July, you're close, but it's kind of like watching like Crossing Over with John Edwards, like I guess, well, I knew a guy whose name began with B, maybe he is the warden. But
I'm sensing you know someone with a first name. That's right.
I'm guessing some of you believe in ghosts, is that correct? Wow, all of you. What are the chances?
Psychic.
But even though he screws up these details, they seem to believe him because of how close he's getting. And the outgoing warden is just about as pissed off as he is delighted to be finally free of this prison. First order of business, Brubaker speaks with some of the inmates. He gets a megaphone and he goes up to the fence and they line everybody up to listen to him. And he lets them know that he's the reform warden that they might have heard about that was sent here from the governor's office. He holds up the whip that he's seen people tortured with, and he says that's going away. And any trustee caught using this will lose his position. One of the other trustees says, so what do we do if we catch someone escaping? We just sort of wave him back in. And he says, shoot him, because he's trying to get across the point right away that I'm not saying there's no rules here, and trying to escape is still a fatal prospect, but we're not going to be treating you any worse than we're supposed to as wards of the state. So he starts with a little bit of critical talk about how they probably don't respect anyone, including themselves. But eventually he gets around to outlawing things like the sale of blood and demanding that prisoners be served the food that the farm is making and that it's not sold behind their backs. Lillian Gray and John Deach show up in the middle of this speech in a car, and I guess they're here to swear him in or to see that he starts the job. Deach is trying to get a feel for him. He asks what he plans to start with, and Brubaker says, blow up the whole place, start over from scratch. And he says, you're making a joke. He says, I guess I am. In the background, Lillian is on the phone with, I think, the press, telling them all the information about the new warden so that they can, because they were trying to keep it under wraps until he was sworn in so that this whole undercover boss scheme would pay off. After they leave, Brubaker inquires about the wounded man from the bus he rode in on, and he's informed that we must have sent him out to the hospital, and he says, well, check on it. Tell me what actually happened, because I have like a list of things in my head that I need to address, and a dying person is first on that list.
And what were the results of that? We'll never know.
We never found the guy, but we did see him the day after in the hospital, just kind of screwed up, and the doctor didn't do anything for him. So I'm guessing he didn't get sent to the hospital. He also orders a dozen pair of sunglasses here. But his soon-to-be assistant, Purcell, gives him basically the lowdown on the prison staff. And trying not to insult them, he basically says they're all a bunch of dummies.
Well, he's trying to make himself look good because he wants a promotion.
Right. And he's saying these people don't like to do paperwork. And he reluctantly admits that he's in for holding up a card game, but claims he was being cheated. Immediately after leaving the office, Purcell has to force an inmate named Abraham out of the larger building that the office is off of. Abraham clearly has something he wants to say to the warden, but Purcell is running interference on that because that's what he's used to doing for the previous warden, I presume. Or because he knows what Abraham's going to say and he doesn't want him to say it. Sunglasses in hand, Brubaker lets the death row inmates out into the yard. He says that they are to be let out once a day instead of the previous every 6 months, which is ridiculous.
Plus, how long are they on death row?
Yeah.
This doesn't seem like the kind of state that
it's not
waits
Texas.
around.
I'll tell you that much. There's no way they waited 6 months in Texas without seeing the sky or God. Larry Lee Bullen shows up at Brubaker's living quarters that night at his request. Going over his file, Brubaker determines that he's basically a victim of the 3 strikes law. He was caught trying to escape from a reformatory school with his twin brother, and his brother was hit by a train, quote. That's what the paperwork says. Bullen explains that his brother was actually shot and placed on the track so it would look like he got hit by the train.
He got hit by a train full of bullets.
Yeah, he got hit by the bullet train. After that, he got arrested for stealing a 65 Pontiac sedan. So that was his first technical felony, and he got 2 years for that. Then he was arrested for stealing a 69 Pontiac convertible. So those were his first 2 felonies. And then he was collected a 3rd time for misdemeanor vagrancy, which wouldn't have counted against the 3 strikes law. But that night he was in a drunk tank with 6 other prisoners, and one of them broke the toilet. So they gave him that charge, which is a felony for destruction of city property over $50, which means he gets life in prison. That's how the 3 strikes law works. 3 felonies, doesn't matter which ones, you get life in prison. So there's lots of murderers in here with him that are going to get out soon, and he has to stay in here forever because he stole 2 cars and broke a toilet. And he didn't even break the toilet. Brubaker promotes him to trustee in charge of the motor pool since he seems to like driving so much. That night, Coombes, the Yaphet Kotto character, sits with Brubaker and gives him the rundown on some of the other trustees. One of them seems to be spying on Brubaker from his watchtower right now. Coombes explains that that guy is a forger, and Brubaker says we should replace all the tower men with one-time killers, not habitual criminals, because they're less likely to reoffend, having gotten it out of their system, than people who are in here for repeat offenses. While they're speaking, a call comes through that the rank barracks roof has collapsed in the storm, and there's a lot of injured men. They've all been crushed by falling debris. We see more footage like the spike through the hand of big chunks of wood stabbed through people's chests and backs because this whole ceiling just collapsed in on them. They kill the power to the building and use flashlights to prevent death by electrocution in this big wet pile of people. Later in the hospital, in quotes again, hospital, Brubaker argues with the local large hospital about wait times for ambulances. They're telling him that they can't send any ambulances right now, but that the next hospital down the way can, even though they're only 20 miles away. And it's going to be an hour, apparently, before any of these men get picked up.
I said I can't afford no more.
Shut up.
What did he say?
Nothing.
I can't afford no more.
Shut up.
Because it turns out this doctor is charging people for his care, even though he's an employee of the state and is supposed to be helping these people as a requirement of the prison. So Brubaker grabs him by his collar and throws him out into the rain and puts another prisoner in charge of all the patients because he seems to know what to do. He has some vague idea of how blood works and how cuts are supposed to be covered and taken care of. The next day, Brubaker mentions something about missing food. He just kind of says it in passing as they're walking down a hallway. He says something about missing chili specifically.
Yeah, he's talking to Willits, and he's like trying to run the math on how much food they're supposed to be getting and how much food they're actually like consuming.
Yeah.
And the numbers aren't matching up.
Because of his experience as an inmate, brief as it was, he went through the cafeteria line and they were running out of food for people, which they're not supposed to do. So he puts Purcell on the case, and he also says he needs to buy a shit ton of shoes. And Purcell's putting up a fight immediately because he's like, I can't just get like a random swath of shoe sizes. Like I need to know exactly how many. But then when Brubaker gets to his office, he finds CP Woodward, the carpenter from earlier, in his office with a chocolate prune cake in hand. And he's very quick to explain,
I hate prunes. They cloud my mind.
Woody is here because he heard about the roof. Apparently Purcell gave him a heads up. And he just slides a contract across Brubaker's desk for him to sign to fix the hole. And Brubaker's not stupid. He's already looked over the paperwork and he sees that it was built 2 years ago by Woody. And he demands that he rebuild it for free now, the way that he should have before. And he says, well, hold on now. We got to talk about this. And he says, well, you guarantee your work, don't you? And Woody says, well, of course I do, but you got to learn to deal with these things. You can't sit around complaining. And he says, I'm not complaining. Are you? Sure sounds like it. Woody gets up and walks around behind him and closes the door. And he reminds Brubaker that he also hasn't been getting much help from the prison lately because he's supposed to be getting all this free labor from prisoners. And Brew points out, well, that's slave labor, and we're not going to do that anymore. He points to the prune cake, and he says, you got to understand, the point ain't whether you like prunes, it's the thought that counts. You just got to accept it, keep your mouth shut, and let things run the way they've run for 100 years. Brubaker tells him not to expect any slave labor from the prison and to leave and to take this shitty cake with him. On the way out, Woody...
Sorry, the prune.
Yeah.
Take this shit cake with you.
Take the shit cake. On the way out, Woody asks Purcell whose team he's on and reminds him that this warden will probably be fired very soon, but you'll still be here at the prison, and I can get back at you when the next warden's here. Brubaker gets a call from Lillian, sitting in what looks like the Oval Office. I think she's the president.
Because she's like the governor's aide or something like that.
Yeah, but she's got a nice office, whatever it is.
Well, I was actually assuming that it was actually, she was much like when she was using Brubaker's office.
She's just sitting at his desk.
Yeah, she's just sitting at the governor's desk.
Maybe that's what's going on. She's already gotten word that he threw Woody out. She tells him that was a bad idea. You're stepping on a lot of toes. And while they speak, Brubaker is basically training a gun on a rat that's crawling through his office. I was really hoping he would shoot it in this scene, but he doesn't. He just kind of draws a bead on it and follows it to a hole, and then it disappears. Brubaker the next day cuts in line at the cafeteria. He insists on eating with the inmates, but as a show of solidarity, I feel like he should have waited in line to make the point better.
Yeah.
He just cuts in front of everybody.
But he's also not the only one who's eating there, because Willis is in there too, and he's a state employee. Like,
right.
They're it seems like everyone's eating together, including the trustees, which when he was an inmate, the trustees had their own table
inside the kitchen. Yeah. But now that everyone's eating outside, Coombes seems pissed off about it, but he's kind of impressed to see that Brubaker actually sat down out there with all the inmates to eat. Later in the day, out in the fields, Brubaker finds the corn crops smell like kerosene.
Yeah.
He determines that someone's dumping kerosene on them to affect the yield of their field.
Is that a thing?
I mean, I guess just contaminating the soil of any kind.
Yeah.
I thought that someone was going to light it on fire.
That's kind of what I was getting.
And just hadn't gotten around to it yet?
Yeah.
That's possible.
But yeah, like I guess everything's just contaminated now.
But somehow in the same scene, he notices this truck pulling away. As it's leaving, it seems to shoot at one of the cows in the field also. Mm-hmm. And
not the livestock.
Yeah. He hops in another vehicle and they follow it out to the cow first. And he inspects the cow and sees that it's been shot in the head, and that whoever's here trying to kill the crops is also killing the animals. And they follow the road down to almost the prison property line, where there's a small house built. And Purcell and Coombes pretend not to have any idea what's going on, but it's very obvious that they know exactly what's happening.
Yeah, like when he goes to knock on the door, it's like, whoever's in there.
Yeah, that was so obnoxious. It made me angry. Brubaker gets out, and as he's like sneaking up to approach on the building, you hear Purcell shout,
I don't know who's in there, and I don't know what you're up to, but we got the new warden from the prison out here, and we're probably coming in.
And is obviously just to warn whoever's in here of the situation. We hear inside a woman say, I'm not going to hide in here like some animal. And she answers the door, and it's the woman from the diner. Apparently she lives here with the guard. Either she was visiting or she actually lives here with him.
No, I think she was visiting, because this is where Huey Rauch lives.
Yes.
This is his home away from home, complete with TV and
and a lot of chili.
Yeah.
She steps back into the house to drag him to the door because he doesn't want to come to the door. And Bru just follows her in, like without asking, because it's all prison property. Like, this house shouldn't be here.
Yeah. And was she had a top on.
She did.
And then she takes it back off?
Yeah, when he gets into the room where the two of them are arguing, she's topless again. I think she was like switching her shirt or something, but she turns to face him with her tits out, and Brubaker's just standing there staring like unapologetically like, nope, this is fine. This is fine with me. The guy's like, put those away, basically, like tells her to cover herself up because he doesn't like this guy getting a look at his girlfriend. He doesn't respond to anything that Huey says. He's just kind of walking around the house noticing things that have been stolen from the prison.
I like that he's like adjusting the picture quality of the TV, trying to get the color balance right.
He's like looking through the refrigerator, and Huey's like, oh, you want me to get you a beer? And he's just like, this is all my stuff that you're offering me. Like, this belongs to the prison. This doesn't belong to you.
Plus, I don't think prisoners get beer.
This guy does.
Well, he does.
He gets it free from the diner.
Yeah, I was going to say he picks it up when he drops off the meat.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, like what you were saying, Pat, that this was supposed to get delivered to the prison.
Right, yeah. But he's the cow that he shot, I'm assuming he was actually going to chop up and take back to the diner.
He did owe them another
He owed them
slab.
some more meat.
How do you...
Steers? That was the unit of measurement the diner guy was using.
One steer, which is equal to...
I don't know. I never learned the metric system. But yeah, he while he's looking at this television, Huey's like, that's my own private property. And he just yanks it out of the wall and carries it back out to the truck and puts it in the back. Without speaking a word to Huey, they go and bust open this locked shed to find all the stolen chili that he was complaining about. And Purcell immediately tries to transfer blame to the warden, who is no longer here. He's like,
that'd be Warden Renfro's monthly supply, I imagine. Man took baths and that stuff.
And Brubaker's not buying it.
I love this, like that's the best lie.
That's all he had. He's definitely the worst liar of all the trustees. Brubaker argues with the prison accountant, Willets, who's in charge of all the purchase orders. And he says, you signed off on all these purchases, and you knew where they were. You were supposed to keep like track of where the stuff went and the inventory. And he says, well, look, I just did whatever the warden told me to. I was just following orders excuse, and is promptly fired. He tries to lean on his status as a civil servant to defend him, but Brubaker don't care. You're fired. Get out. Purcell complains aloud that the purchases will be much harder without Willets here, and Brubaker says they're going to do it, referring to the prisoners. He says they're going to have an election, and they're going to pick an inmate council, and they'll be in charge of making all the purchase orders. Purcell responds under his breath,
That's a hell of an idea.
And when forced to repeat himself, he changes the intonation to make it sound complimentary.
That's a hell of an idea.
Everybody laughs at the guard, Huey, when he comes back to the trustee compound, apparently evicted from his unlawful house on the prison grounds. And that night they burn the illegal home to the ground.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what I wanted. Like, as soon as they showed this house, and I was like,
excited.
That house should not be here. I was like, as soon as they cut open that shed and found all the chili, I was like, they should just burn this place to the ground. And they did it that night. I loved it. I was so happy. Yeah, so they just bring a bunch of torches out there. And one of the trustees is like, maybe we should do this during the day. It'd be a little more covert. And Bullen's like, yeah, that's probably why we're doing it at night, to make an example of this. Later, the trustees all worry that for sure he's going to get killed for this, or for something that he does soon. He's not long for this prison. Lillian Gray pays him a visit the next day, and she condescends to him a lot in the name of compromise. She warns him not to step on any toes, that he's not going to get anything done for these prisoners if he won't go along with some of what they want from him. A crowd of onlookers swarm the prison yard to watch Brubaker and the prisoners compete in a game of polo on horseback. They all seem to be having fun. And
very dangerous.
Yeah.
Like they're falling off the horses and just being surrounded by these like galloping horses all around them.
And Brubaker even pulls one of them off the horse as they're in the middle of the game. But Coombes eventually points out, I haven't heard these men laugh like that in years. He's like, doesn't bother you, does it? We get a quick montage of various prisoners campaigning to join the inmate council. And the selected council meets just outside Brubaker's office. They're waiting for him to sit down with them, but he invites them to start without him because he wants them to make decisions on their own. Larry Lee Bullen insults the coffee they've been provided with. Caldwell, this tall He kind of looks like a Russian character. I don't know. Like, he doesn't talk much, so we don't really get a good feel for this.
The guy with
the guy with the
knit
beanie?
cap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Everett McGill.
Yeah. Is that his name?
That's the actor's name.
I don't know the actor.
Oh, no?
What's he from?
Oh, he's from Twin Peaks, People Under the Stairs.
Okay.
I've
seen People Under the Stairs. I haven't seen Twin Peaks yet.
I think he just looks like Jack Nicholson in Cuckoo's Nest.
I thought he looked Cillian Murphy-ish.
Yeah, yes, you're right. He looks more like him.
But he's in a knit cap, and he's basically just insulting what they're doing and says it's a big waste of time. And Brubaker invites him to resign from his position. But eventually the council starts making some preparations to fix the plumbing in the barracks. Brubaker tries some of the coffee and looks disgusted immediately.
I like that.
Like, oh, God.
It's like, oh,
You're
this
right.
coffee is bad. It's like, this coffee tastes like shit, Basil. It is shit, Austin. Then it's not just me then.
The stool sample. Abraham shows up again in the middle of this meeting trying to speak with Brubaker, and Purcell tries to pull him away, and Coombes is like, don't you touch him. And then he's like, thank you. Anyway, I have to talk to the warden, and he's like, okay, get him out of here. Yeah. He doesn't need to talk to the warden. He's just kidding. Get him out of here. And so they try and shove him away, but Brubaker's like, come into my office while they have this meeting. All the bad guys around this table, namely Caldwell, the Joe Spinell character, and even Coombes here is like terrified of what Abraham is saying to Brubaker in the office. They're just trying to read lips, basically, because they can't totally hear what's going on. In this conversation, he learns a few very interesting things from Abraham. One, his eye is screwed up because he got hit with a bat and chain and rope hard enough to screw up his face. He's been serving 38 years of a 35-year sentence, and some number of years ago, or somewhere around 30, he was in charge of making coffins for about 200 prisoners who were buried here on the grounds illegally. Mm-hmm. Abraham kind of mumbles to himself while Brubaker accepts a call. He says something along the lines of,
Yard man say, Abraham, chop them up in tiny little pieces and take them for a walk down in them shadows.
He tells him that he was asked to bury 200 coffins along a fence somewhere in the field, and that he built the coffins himself. That's how he knows it happened. Caldwell and Joe Spinell bust into the office, and unfortunately, Brubaker decides now to say, will you show me exactly where tomorrow morning? Which is unfortunate. Brubaker starts to drive away from the prison to meet with some of the other prison board staff when Coombes urges Brubaker not to release Abe, to just keep him in prison beyond the end of his sentence because he can't function outside the prison. But after Brubaker leaves, Purcell takes Abe, walks him to Caldwell and Spinell, and they proceed to torture him. They wrap his toes in stripped wire and wind up a generator to electrocute him. Then we cut back to the meeting with the prison board, where Deach, this squinty-eyed jerk guy...
The mayor from Jaws.
Yeah. And he's playing basically the exact same guy here. And he's complaining that the crop yield is down 40% since Brubaker took over, in effect admitting that he entrusted Huey with the mission of drenching the kerosene crops and giving them a financial reason to fire Brubaker. Brubaker says, if you give me a year, I can promise you a surplus of potentially $150,000. And they're like, oh, that's great. Well, all we'll need to do is figure out where we're going to spend it over at Wall Street to like get the best return. And he says, well, no, I think we should recycle it into the facility. And Deach's smile very quickly fades. He's not interested in this plan.
See, this is where you would, I know Brubaker don't compromise.
Yeah.
But this is where you would compromise was like, yeah, you get some and the prison would get some.
Sure.
This is a mutually beneficial
arrangement. No, you don't
arrangement.
compromise with these people because they're not going to compromise with you. That's the whole point, is that they're just going to kill you if they get the chance. So they need a new boiler. Another board member points out that purchase has already been approved, and he says, how come nobody in your office will answer any of my calls? I need the money to actually make the purchase, and they claim to be working on it. Brubaker is reprimanded for canceling Woody's age-old contract, but there was never actually a contract. It was just an agreement for slave labor. And he's then taken to task for assaulting the doctor and firing a state employee. Deach accuses Brubaker of liking the men because they're reckless like he is, and it just makes me so angry.
I think also the implication is it was being a homophobic remark.
So Lillian agrees that the men are to be treated like humans, that Brubaker is not wrong, that it's their responsibility as the people running the prison to make sure that these people are treated properly. And the board jokes about a bunch of luxury items they might as well add. Oh, why don't we give them all a bubble bath? And why don't we give them all this great stuff? And then Brubaker says, maybe a roof that won't collapse on their heads and kill them. And Deach's patience basically runs out with this comment, and he's like, that's enough. And Brubaker says, that roof wasn't insured? We have this whole laundry list of farming equipment that is. And for some reason, Deach is very quick to admit that he personally approved all of those insurance policies, and he thought they were very sensible. But Brubaker then explains that not only did his own company sell the policies to the prison, but the prison doesn't have any of that equipment, which Deach must have known, or else why would he sell those insurance policies? Like, the whole point of selling the insurance policy is that that the thing isn't there. So why would you say, I personally signed off on those, to just completely condemn yourself? But nobody here cares anyway. Brubaker's the only person who cares at this table. So he basically stands up and says, I have more important things to do than sit here and argue with you people. So he gets up to leave, and Lillian follows him out and tells him again, you need to play ball with these people if you want to make any kind of meaningful progress. And she follows him out into the parking lot, where he thinks for a second that he locked his keys in the car.
Well, he did, but...
Well, they're not locked in. They're just in the car because she gets in from the opposite side. I'm not sure what the implication of, what is the metaphor of that? Like, is she smarter than him? Because I don't think...
I think that he's seeing an obstacle of which he thinks that there's no way around, and she's trying to show him, look, there are other ways of doing things. You're not thinking things through. You're not looking at the whole picture.
Yeah.
But I think it conflicts with the message of the film later, which is that you shouldn't compromise. That's the message I get.
I don't know that that's the
case at
all.
all.
I don't think that's true.
I think I think that Richard's right here, where if you had taken the opportunity to maybe find some opportunities to compromise, you could have stayed in this prison longer and made more of a difference longer.
I don't get that message from it. But we'll get there more later. Back at his living quarters on the prison grounds, Brubaker falls asleep drinking on his porch. In the morning, he notices a corpse dangling from a nearby flagpole. From underneath, he confirms this is Abraham, dead before he can point Brubaker to the burying grounds, and he immediately starts to untie the body, which he should not do. He shouldn't touch this rope, but presumably he unties him and lowers him all the way to the ground. And then he gets into his office furious, and he finds all the torture equipment just piled up on his desk. And Coombes enters and basically blames Brubaker for what happened. Not the people who did it, but Brubaker. And Coombes seems to regret the comment as soon as he makes it, because as he's walking out of the office, someone else goes in to talk to him. He's like, just give him some time. He deserves to sit for a second without people interrupting him. Coombes watches through the window into Brubaker's office as he picks up the wires from the torture equipment and tests it on himself to try and feel some of what Abraham went through. Again, contaminating evidence in a murder case.
Yeah, the moment he touched it, it was like you leave it on the desk. It's like, I'm just going to dust this for prints, and I'll know immediately who did this. Because he's got fingerprints of everyone on file because it's a prison.
But he tests it on himself, and surprisingly, it hurts him. Brubaker puts everyone to work digging in search of these graves. Lillian Gray calls him immediately to stop because he's stepping on much bigger toes than he realizes now. He agrees to meet her privately at the fairgrounds at 7, and when he gets there, she's waiting with another member from the board, and a state senator from the earlier meeting shows up. The senator basically offers to release a bunch of new funds that would allow for the hiring of more employees and to take better care of the prisoners. And Brubaker says, how many bodies are buried there, Senator? The senator reminds him that the field was a pauper's field before it was a prison, and that grave robbing is a felony. So you don't want to end up in your own prison. Basically, if you start digging up bodies, we're going to charge you with digging up bodies.
So yeah, and I thought what this was going to go was that the senator was saying that there are bodies, but they're not prisoners.
Not prisoners? Oh, okay.
And
that'd be much worse.
Yeah, and so I thought for sure when they later on, getting into that, but with the bodies that they do find, spoiler alert, we're going to have prison uniforms.
Oh, okay.
And it'd be like these paupers wore prison uniforms?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
He keeps talking about how he's going to go further and further up the line, eventually getting to the governor's office, and they all admit the governor knows all about this. You wouldn't be telling him anything new, and he's helping to cover it up just like we are. Lillian
doesn't a senator outrank the governor?
A state senator, though. He's not like in the Senate. He's a state senator.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I thought he was the state's senator.
He's a state senator, but not of the two of the body of the Senate in that state.
Got it.
They should just have a different word for that. I'm tired of trying to explain the difference in these podcasts where we keep running. It's like, is this a state senator or a senator for the state?
Is this a ship or a boat?
Yeah. If you can put a senator on a state senator. Lillian tells him that this is his chance to ask for more, that he finally has leverage over them, which is naive bullshit because he doesn't have any leverage at all. He goes back to digging, and Brubaker notices something in the grass near the fence, maybe uneven ground. Not entirely clear. He seems to have forgotten that Abraham did tell him specifically that they were buried along a fence. So he brings a bunch of men to dig there. And hours later, just as the rain starts coming down pretty hard, they find several coffins all in a row. I think 4 total here. The trustees are arguing about it. Floyd, the Joe Spinell character, thinks that the prison board will stop him, even though he's already found 4 bodies. So the prison board is obviously too late to stop this particular discovery. Huey starts complaining that it's basically Abraham's fault for saying anything, and Coombes loses it on him. He busts open a pool cue like he's going to stab him.
He does this amazing series of moves where he gets up out of his chair, kicks it back, grabs the pool cue, slams it down, and then flips a table, like just a position and like to make sure that the whole area is clear between the two of them. And
he gets right up to him with the pool cue, but then he comes to his senses and he's like, I don't need to kill somebody while I'm in prison. I probably have an end date. I'm going to get out eventually. There's no reason to stab this guy to death right here. He's not worth it.
But I thought for sure like Huey Rauch was going to like scoff it off, but he immediately goes.
He's terrified.
Yeah, he immediately goes into his room and calls Eddie. He's like, can I talk to you? But
yeah.
He's like,
but
I gotta
also,
get out of here.
First, he's like, well, hold on now. That's not really what I meant. But yeah, Coombes and another trustee pull up to where Brubaker's trying to deal with these coffins, and they say, hey, Huey just left. He took a truck and he drove off, and he's probably hiding out. Probably at that diner, they tell him.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to something real quick, because Rauch is asking Eddie, the knit cap guy, to come with him.
Oh, right, yeah.
And Eddie's like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And I thought this was going to pay off a little bit, like that Eddie was going to be like, Eddie was coming around, like, no, I want to see how this plays out.
I do think the implication here is that he's starting to see Brubaker's side of it a little more. And he feels like he's being treated more like a human, and he's willing to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Mm.
But you're right. It doesn't extend beyond this scene.
But I mean, it still doesn't excuse what he did to Abraham.
No, not at all.
And Purcell too.
Purcell was part of that, and Coombes was part of that too. In as much as he was not letting this information get out.
Yeah.
And he wanted to keep Abraham there. They're all complicit partially.
What is in it for them to keep the bodies a secret?
What's in it for anyone to reveal or keep the bodies a secret?
Well, as I'm saying, like, who cares if they find the body? It just shows that, yeah, someone buried these prisoners 30 years ago. But
they just know that.
But they know how the system works here. They know that there's a high probability that this prison board is going to find a way to put it back on the prisoners. Like, well, you guys killed a bunch of prisoners. So.
Well, this happened 30 years ago, though. It wouldn't have been them.
Maybe.
But I think more likely it's just, I know that the governor doesn't want these bodies found, and it's hell for me if the governor's mad. So let's just keep everything hunky-dory and make everything nice. It's the same problem that Lillian has, which is, let's just be complicit in these terrible crimes that are happening, and maybe things will be slightly better for us. So all these people are guilty by association, basically. Brubaker takes Coombes, and does he bring Coombes, or does he bring... He brings Larry Lee. Is it just him and Larry Lee by themselves?
No, they split up into different groups because they're trying to figure out where Huey Rauch is gone.
In multiple vehicles?
Yeah.
But Larry Lee and Brubaker take the truck to the diner.
To the diner, yeah.
Larry Lee says he's going to go around back in case anyone tries to come out of the living quarters. And Brubaker goes in through the diner, and he talks to the guy that runs the diner, and he tells them to stay out. They're not open yet. He doesn't know where Huey is or where his sister is and what he's talking about. He says, what about through this door? What's through this door? And he says, that's my house. But that door doesn't work. No one's ever gone through there in a long time, so don't even bother with it. And it's like, what do you mean? You just said your house is through here. What do you mean the door doesn't work? Like, the door doesn't open? So he moves.
Escalator temporarily stairs.
Yeah. And he says, well, I ought to call the police. And he's like, okay, call the police, but for now, shut up. And he pushes through into the home. He gets to close to the bedroom where Huey is actually hiding there with Carol. He's basically using Carol as a human shield as he moves slowly through the house, and he notices Larry Lee outside, and he opens a door to the front area where Larry Lee is waiting, and he throws Carol down to him to distract him, and while Larry is trying to catch her, he shoots Larry in the chest, basically.
Yeah, and he just as easily could have shot Carol. He didn't have much care who he was going to hit. Yeah,
and Brubaker hears these shots being fired and immediately shoots at Huey. Who tries to return fire and ends up like hitting his own counter, like stuff on his own counter that's exploding in Carol's counter in the kitchen. He shoots Huey, and Huey gets blasted through the window out into the yard. So him and Larry Lee are both dead. And Carol's just sobbing in the corner because she's traumatized by everything that just happened.
Who would have thought this would happen if I dated a criminal?
Yeah.
Who's literally still in prison.
Yeah.
And I sometimes go have sex with him at the prison in our secret illegal house.
I didn't think this through.
Back at the prison, the board are getting testimony from a quote-unquote doctor that they paid for information on these coffins that have been dug up. And he says, you know, we have a saying in doctor school, and that is that you can't tell how long a body has been dead ever. So who knows? And Brubaker shows up in the middle of this nonsense testimony. They're like, he's literally suggesting, oh, well, maybe the people were dead before they were chopped up, and they were killed in some sort of a collapse, like if the coffins collapsed and the bodies were broken. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. What you're talking about doesn't make any sense. And they're like, oh, well, it's a pauper's grave. And it's like, paupers don't die in pieces, though. That doesn't, none of what you're saying makes sense. And Brubaker shows up in the middle of this nonsense. They ask him what his priorities are. And he says, well, he suggests basically the cost-cutting measure of just shooting inmates behind the courthouse when they're sentenced to come here. And the board does not like his tone. And he just turns around to leave. And again, Lillian follows him out of the room and insists everyone else wait behind. And they start the same argument that they had before anew, and she tries again to explain herself, eventually frustratingly just shouting, God damn it, I agree with you. And he replies, no, you don't, not really. And we cut immediately to a new warden introducing himself to the prisoners as Brubaker's leaving the prison. And Coombes sees him walking out, and he walks away from his formation. The trustees are all supposed to be lined up at the gate to tell Brubaker that he was right all along. And Brubaker's like almost in tears to get this information from Coombes because he cares what Coombes thinks and he's trying to do what's right. And the entire prison yard goes into the most epic slow clap I've ever seen in anything as Brubaker's driven out of the prison and their lives. A quick epilogue of text explains that 2 years after Henry Brubaker was fired, 24 inmates, led by Richard Dickie Coombes, brought suit against Wakefield Prison, and that the court decided that the treatment of prisoners at Wakefield was unconstitutional and ordered that the prison be reformed or closed. The governor was not reelected. The undercover boss plot of the original story was made up, but it has been suggested that this plot device was inspired by Sing Sing prison warden Thomas Mott Osborne, who in 1913 under an assumed name, had himself committed to New York's Auburn State Penitentiary to see how the prisoners were being treated. But that's where we end the film.
It's very bittersweet. I was really hoping for, because nothing's really changed.
Yeah,
like he affected the prisoners' lives.
And, in the long run, according to the epilogue, something was changed.
Yeah, but I guess he gave Coombes the courage.
Yeah.
To stand up to the system.
He reminded them that they're people and that they have rights that they can fight for.
Yeah. I was hoping for some kind of button like, that's not that a button. I mean, like, I really like comeuppance, and I don't like it when people don't get them.
Yeah.
And I was hoping
nobody gets it in this movie.
Yeah. I think that's realistic, though.
Yeah. I know. But I was hoping
that's sad.
I was hoping the new warden would
say... We can't even get comeuppance in our movies.
Yeah. I was hoping the new warden would say something like, well, I'm putting an end to the trustee system, and then you would just see all the trustees go, oh, crap. Like, we've stepped on our own toes.
But I feel like, according to Brubaker's belief system, Lillian Gray is half as bad as everyone else at the table. because she's willing to play along with their game. And that if no one was willing to play along with their game, they wouldn't get as far as they do.
Yeah, that's true, but everyone's in it for themselves.
Right. And that's the problem. But I don't see how she was right about anything. Like, none of her strategies would have worked in the long run. Like, when she thinks that they have leverage over it's like, if you dig up those bodies, then they're going to be screwed, so they don't want you to do that. And it's like, then he dug up the bodies and nobody cared.
Well, what did she think was going to happen by hiring Brubaker?
Did she hire him? I don't know who hired him.
The governor picked him.
Yeah, but the governor knows about the bodies too, so...
Well, I think they picked him without knowing he was going to be doing this radically different from the way it's been done now.
But wasn't that what he was brought in to do, to prison reform?
Yeah, but I think that they brought him in to do her version of prison reform, and that didn't go that way.
Yeah, the compromise version.
Yeah.
Where it's like, we'll give you 1 extra pickle a month, and then you can die, and we'll just kill you indiscriminately and bury you in our own prison. This movie was intensely frustrating to watch. The guy playing Deach is doing a hell of a job, though, because I wanted to murder him the whole time.
Yeah, Murray Hamilton. And again, the mayor from Jaws.
Yeah.
Never compare me to the Jaws mayor. Never!
But I feel bad that Murray Hamilton, like, gets kind of placed into these kind of roles.
Yeah.
He's kind of reminds me of Hal Holbrook. Hal Holbrook oftentimes is the bad guy.
Hal Holbrook is the good guy as often as he's the bad guy, though.
You think?
I think he was a good guy in the Fog. I think he was the one who was trying to like make up for the mistakes of his ancestors. I feel like he plays a nice guy in a lot of stuff I've seen. I actually don't think I see him as a bad guy very often.
Well, like Dirty Harry and Capricorn 1. I named 2 things.
There you go.
But anyway.
The director here was Stuart Rosenberg. He did another prison movie called Cool Hand Luke.
Yeah, he did.
If you've heard of it. He also directed the first Amityville horror movie. Writer W.D. Richter is a badass. He wrote the 1978 Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is the best version, and it's just a phenomenal film. And he also wrote a little movie called Big Trouble in Little China. The story by Arthur A. Ross, who co-wrote The Creature from the Black Lagoon. So he's like an old school writer, but he wrote the one that was not fictional, that was adapted into W.D. Richter's story.
Oh, I was like, there was an actual Creature from the Black Lagoon?
Yes, that's a true story. You didn't know that?
That's why The Shape of Water is a documentary.
Yeah, that's the one that W.D. Richter adapted from the true story. The uncredited story credit and 9 days worth of directing were the work of Bob Rafelson, who directed 5 Easy Pieces, Ahead, the Monkees movie, which he co-wrote with Jack Nicholson. The Postman Always Rings Twice, so that's 3 Jack Nicholson projects. Producer here was Ron Silverman. Ron Silverman produced Krull. He produced Shoot to Kill, and he was the grandfather of guest host Robert Leininger, who was in our Friday the 13th episode. Robert Redford was Henry Brubaker here. He's the Sundance Kid. He also founded the Sundance Film Festival. He's in All the President's Men. I think maybe Emmet Walsh's character is a reference to Woodward from All the President's Men. He plays Alexander Pierce in the MCU. He also directed 1980's Best Picture winner Ordinary People, which we'll be getting to soon. Yaphet Kotto was Richard Dickie Coombes. He's Parker from Alien. He plays Kananga in Live and Let Die. I think that's where he gets hit with the inflatable bullet.
Yeah.
And he just floats away.
I like him.
Explodes.
I love him in, he's also really good in Midnight Run.
Oh, yes.
Where he's the FBI agent who's on their tail.
Yeah, he's great. Jane Alexander was Lillian Gray here. She was Nurse Edna in the Cider House Rules. She's Dr. Grasnick in the America version of The Ring. And she plays Margaret Phelps in Kramer versus Kramer, which I think is the other mother who they're friends with, who is at the park when the kid gets hurt and then shows up as a character witness in court saying like, oh, well, the kid got hurt and I was there and I saw it happen. She's in that movie. Murray Hamilton, John Deach, we already mentioned before. He's Vaughn in Jaws. He's also Mr. Robinson in The Graduate, also with Dustin Hoffman. David Keith was Larry Lee Bullen. He played Andy McGee in Firestarter.
Yeah.
He's Sid Worley in An Officer and a Gentleman. And he plays Major Coonan in U-571, which has some incredible sound design.
Oh, I really like that movie. Glad I saw that one in the theaters.
Yes, that's a theater movie for sure. Morgan Freeman was Walter, the death row inmate. He has a weirdly small role in this movie. He doesn't really show up after they give him the
first
sunglasses.
movie or one of his first?
It's one of his first. It's not his first. I did see in the IMDb trivia it called it his first credited role, but it's not. He had other feature roles before that. He obviously He also hosted the Electric Company for a decade before this.
Mm.
He's in Shawshank, Bruce Almighty, Seven. He's Lucius Fox in the Chris Nolan Batman trilogy. Matt Clark here was Roy Purcell. He plays Chester the bartender in Back to the Future 3. He's the Secretary of Defense in Buckaroo Banzai, and he plays Uncle Henry in Return to Oz. Richard Ward was Abraham Cook. He's the dad from The Jerk, and unfortunately he passed away before this film was released. He actually died shortly after production in 1979. Emmet Walsh was CP Woody Woodward. He plays Harv in Critters. He's Dr. Dolan in Fletch. He's Detective Visser in Blood Simple.
Yeah, that's one of his...
he gets the most to do there.
He's great.
Albert Salmi was Rory Polk. That's the new guy that's taking over as the warden at the end of the film. He plays Mr. Noonan, Danny Noonan's father, in Caddyshack later this year. He's also credited as E1 in Escape from Planet of the Apes.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I know the movie really well, but I don't know who or what E1 is.
Are there a lot of humans in that movie or no?
Yeah, in Escape?
Yeah.
Yes. In Escape, it's mostly humans. There are only 3 apes.
Yeah, because I would have guessed that E1 was like a code name given to a prisoner.
Yeah.
An escapee, perhaps.
Yeah, Escapee 1 or something like that. Yeah, not familiar with that one. I've only seen the first Planet of the Apes movie and then the newer trilogy. And he was also Greel in Dragon Slayer, which is coming out next year.
Yeah.
Joe Spinell was Floyd Birdwell. We just saw him in Cruising, The Ninth Configuration, and Forbidden Zone before this. And he'll be back for Melvin and Howard and The First Deadly Sin and I think another one, The Little Dragons. And then Maniac next year. So busy guy. Nathan George was Leon Edwards. That was one of the guys on the prison board. He played Washington in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think he's one of the patients. And he was Patrolman James in Pelham 123. Don Blakely was Jerome Boyd here. He played Abby in Defiance. And he played Wilson's trainer in Pulp Fiction. That's the guy that Bruce Willis kills in The Ring.
Mm.
Noble Willingham was Dr. Fenster. That was General Taylor in Good Morning Vietnam. He plays Clay Stone in City Slickers. And he plays, this is a great name, and he was also Zebulon Cardoza in The Hudsucker Proxy. The Coen brothers are really good with names.
Yeah.
What did you say? Noble Willingham is already a great name.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fine on its own, but Zebulon Cardoza is amazing.
I like him in Ace Ventura, where he plays the manager of the Miami Dolphins, who's tasked Courtney Cox is like, I don't give a goddamn about that fish. Fillet it in fast food if you want it.
Is that when he's like crawling around in the tank trying to look for clues?
No. He's yelling at Courtney Cox and the other guy, and he goes like, "Shit, you know how superstitious these players are." And the guy looks down at his keychain with the rabbit's foot on it. He tries to hide
cover it. We also on the prison board have Wilford Brimley, which I felt like. He's a pretty big name to play such like an anonymous character on this board. Maybe it was just at the time, but
yeah, I mean, I don't think he was as big of a name at this point because even in China Syndrome, which was the year before,
that's true. It was very small.
I never miss an opportunity to bring up the China Syndrome.
We've noticed, but yeah, he's great in this as just one of the grumpier board members who's like helping jump into the fight with Deach about how Brubaker is just in love with all the prisoners and they deserve, hot tubs and stuff.
What do you think he's most known from? Because to me, he's most known for insurance commercials.
It's diabetes commercials.
Or diabetes commercials, that's it.
Not Quaker Oats? I go to Quaker Oats.
I think most people go...
Did he do Quaker Oats commercials too?
I think it's just because of the way he says diabetes.
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 That people remember him for that specifically. But
you don't go to The Thing for you?
For acting, I go to The Thing. But for real life, I always think of those diabetes.
I go to The Natural, another Robert Redford.
Yeah.
Robert Redford. I'm talking like Wilford Brimley now. Sorry.
Or Ben Luckett in Cocoon.
Yes.
It's probably second to The Thing for me. But he's also Dr. Blair as the Thing character. Ben Luckett in Cocoon. Pop Fisher in The Natural with Robert Redford 4 years later. And he'll be back in Borderline later this year. And then we had J.C. Quinn was one of the barbers in the early haircutting scene. He was Sonny Dawson in The Abyss. He's Duncan in Maximum Overdrive. and he'll be back later this year in Gloria and Times Square. So we'll see more of him. Jerry Mayer was the other barber, and he played Professor Milstein in Simon, which I'm assuming that's just someone else from the school that they stole him from at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Rob Garrison played Pretty Boy. That's one of the inmates. He's Tommy in Karate Kids 1, 2, and the Cobra Kai series that's on YouTube right now. He's the guy who says, "Put him in a body bag, yeah!" in the final fight.
So he must have been real young in this.
Yeah. He's also Sayer in Prom Night later this year, and he plays a cop in a MacGyver episode. I'm pretty sure that's Birthday. He's one of the ones that recognizes the flags, the sailing flags, as being a symbol of distress.
The semaphore flags.
Sure, there you go. Yeah,
no, semaphore is a different. No, semaphore is when you're making like.
Pinafore is a ship, right? Yeah, this was I enjoyed this movie. It's very frustrating. It's like one of those frustration comedies with Ben Stiller, but instead of just not wanting his in-laws to hate him, it's about a guy trying to save a bunch of people's lives from the inherent racism and justice problems in the South and the prisons.
Yeah, I want to give this one a thumbs up. It's not one of those real uplifting movies because you're like, wow, we're 40 years later and things aren't really any better.
Yeah, but you can't give it a thumbs down just because it's depressing. It has to be because it was a bad movie.
Oh, I know. I'm still going to give it a thumbs up. I'm just saying I don't know that I'll be watching it again anytime real soon.
I'm not in a rush to either. It's very depressing. But I thought it was pretty accurate. I thought the characters all worked out pretty well. It's a thumbs up from me, for sure. Richard?
I also give it a thumbs up. I'm not super crazy about this movie, but I was engaged. I did watch it, and I wasn't like at any point was like sighing or checking my watch. I was just like, all right, this is a movie, and
it checks all the boxes of a prison movie where it's like everything's totally unfair. There's local people that are making a bunch of money and
escape attempts,
and at least one prisoner is killed. That's a requirement. You have it in Shawshank and Cool Hand Luke and all over the place. They all have the same moments that you have to get to. But I think this one's just as capably written and directed as any of those other ones.
It's a very capably made movie. It looks really nice. It's very well shot.
Yeah.
So, thumbs up.
All right. I am going to start us here. I'm putting this just below Last Married Couple and just above The Mountain Men. That's where it's going on mine.
For me, I am actually going to put this just above Night of the Juggler.
Okay.
And just below Tom Horn.
All right.
I am going just below The Mountain Men and just above Blues Brothers.
All right, there you go. I believe that's everything for this one. If you guys have any thoughts you'd like to share with us, we are Vintage Video Pod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Letterboxd, where, as I've said before, you can find each of our full movie rankings for the year. We can also be found at vintagevideopodcast.com. Please consider rating us on iTunes to help people find the show, and if you take the time to leave us a review, we will thank you personally in an upcoming episode. If you're feeling especially generous, you can support the show through patreon.com/vintagevideopodcast. And on that note, here's a shout out to Aaron at the New Age Influencers podcast. Thanks for the kind words in your iTunes review. We hope you continue to enjoy the show. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time when we'll be discussing Can't Stop the Music, which IMDb calls a pseudo-autobiographical story of disco's The Village People.